Basically, we were told, well, your son was an addict. What did he expect? And I said, yes, he did have an illness of using abusing substances, illicit substances, but he was still my son. He was a person. It's been 5 years, and I still can't get the police report. They say the case isn't closed. Well, then investigate it. A lot of parents would say, oh, my kid wouldn't do that. And I was the mom who always said, yeah, he probably did. So what do we need to do, to take care of it or to face the consequences? From a young age, Cade understood that his actions had consequences. From elementary school, he was having an issue with another child kind of bullying him, which is funny now because he turned out to be a really big kid. But he told me about it, and I said, well, you need to use your words to solve this problem. Go to your counselor, tell her. And he said, I don't think so. And I said, well, I'll just tell you, if you choose to get in a fight with him, that means that you're accepting the consequences of having a fight at school. And those are whatever they were, I don't remember. And he said, okay. And I said, so you understand if you hit him, you're going to get in trouble. And he said, yeah, I understand. So he didn't hit him, but he took him down. Cade was a wrestler. So he just did a double leg and put the kid on his back, and he didn't have consequences for that. So especially when he got older, protected the underdog, he was a protector. His best friend was smaller than him quite a bit, and he was fiercely protective of Wesley, fiercely protective of his older sister, even though they didn't always get along so much. But he was fiercely protective of friends and family. He did, in fact, once get in trouble at school for protecting someone else who was getting picked on. And the teacher said, I know what you were doing, and that's commendable, but another way would have been better. 8th and 9th grade, he started smoking weed, got in trouble for that at school. Bad decision. And he actually went through a drug class that the school required him to take before he could come back to school. And I remember him telling me things about it that he didn't know, or that he was impressed that they were teaching them about something that was so taboo. Especially in the town they grew up in. There's no drugs there. That's another story. But Cade never became ugly. He did ugly things as far as stealing property and money to fund his addiction. But he was never hateful or violent towards any of us. he got a little mouthy one time to me, and he's a self-proclaimed mama's boy. So, and I fixed that real quick. I said, listen here, buddy, you're going through this right now, and I'm the only one who's been here through the good and the bad and the ugly, and you will not talk to me like that. And that was the last time. He knew I had his back, and he always had mine. He was, like I said, very protective. You look back and think, oh, I should have done this, that, and something else. I may have made a difference, but I was so naive about drugs and that my child would ever do that. Be ornery, yes. Make some bad choices, yes. But not these kind of choices. And I've asked my family, was it there and I just didn't see it? The signs or the evidence in our home. I was clueless. Till the night that he tried to take his life. And that was the first hint I had that something very serious and wrong was going on. It probably began with the death of my dad. He was pretty close to my dad, and they were very alike in being outdoorsy and hunting and fishing. And Cade wanted to be a welder like his granddad. And my dad passed suddenly and threw us all for a loop, but especially Cade. I think he was at a very impressionable age. I don't remember exactly how old he was, but he took it very hard. And we actually did counseling for that. He and I both did. We were alike in a lot of ways.
How he was poisoned was basically kind of being stuck in California by the system. There's a system there that can get the vulnerable out to recovery and then can put them in a cycle of getting them out of recovery, into recovery, out of recovery. And there's a lot of money that exchanges hands. And they pick on the vulnerable. They pick on the families that maybe have the resources, i.e. really good health insurance, that basically has no limit on what they'll pay. And when they can find that, that's a loophole that they've really, really been able to take advantage of.
We were clueless about fentanyl, and we were clueless about substance use disorder altogether. There's not a chapter in the parenting book that tells you what to do if your child is exposed to drugs or experiments or if it becomes an addiction. So we want to try to help anyone we can. I know of one life that has been saved directly because of Cade, and I cried like a baby. It was a very, I don't know how to explain it, thankful moment, I guess, that everything we have been doing the last 5 years it did have an impact on someone. It's hard. I had a student come to me once after our group had presented our information about fentanyl and Narcan, and he was wise beyond his years, and he said, "Why do you do this? Because I can see that it hurts, it's painful." And I told him the same thing. If I can save one child in Cade's name, I'll feel like I've done something for someone that wasn't there when I needed the information, when I needed to help my son and didn't know what to do. Well, he didn't have a whole lot of friends, but the ones he did have were really good friends. This has been very difficult for them. I understand why they don't come around as much, or if at all, or even check on us, because it's painful for me. I know it's painful for them too. A lot of them distance themselves from Cade for their own well-being when he started using heavily. And Cade knew that, and he was never upset with them for that. He understood why they didn't want to hang out or whatever. He knew they were making the better choice. A couple of his friends have expressed grief and regret for not standing by him through this. And I told them, don't, because Cade knew why you stepped away, and he was not mad. He didn't want you to participate in this part of his life. And I would say was relieved that you weren't there for this ugly. I told his girlfriend, who he adored, I need you to break up with Cade. I need you to leave. It's ugly, and it's going to get uglier, and it will always be ugly. Any lifelong battle with substance use disorder, there's nothing pretty about it. I said, I don't have a choice. I'm his mom. I have to be here and go through this. But you can go, and we love you, and we want you to go. We don't want you to live through this. But of course she didn't. He told me once, we were in the car, and he said, Mom, this is the girl I'm going to marry. And if he would have gone straight, maybe they would have. I don't know. But I'm pretty sure I would have several grandchildren by now if he were still here. No doubt. No doubt.
So what happened?
I don't think a lot of people understand part of what you grieve is what could have been. Would he have successfully become a welder? You know, would he have been on the pipeline or worked in the steel industry for 30 years like his granddad did? Would he just go and run cattle and weld on our farm, which that was his intent always, was to live on our farm. That was his happy place. Would he? It's no doubt he would have children. I told him that we had a covenant between us that I got to name his children. So when he got married, he had to tell his wife that, oh, I forgot, we've already named my children. So that was always a joke with us. But, to see him be an uncle, and he was missed at his sister's wedding. He went to California for rehab. I don't remember if it was second or third trip. He was 20, which legally is an adult, but he was a hayseed from Oklahoma going to California. That was a whole different world, and I worried about that. And he was what's the word? I can't think of the word. He was contacted by a rehab broker who gave him money, a plane ticket. He had lost his ID, so they even sent him money to buy a new ID so he could get on the plane to go out there.
We were, at one moment we were had super gratitude towards JB, which I think his name was James something, because he was helpful. He got Cade out to California. At the time, Cade's addiction heavily affected us as a family financially. We lost our home. We could barely make ends meet. I've had the same job for 33 years, had the same job then, made a good amount of money, but because of everything, we were hand to mouth. Did not have the money to send him to California. So even though it is technically against the law, they paid Cade's airfare to California the first time.
All the counselors or admin in the rehabs that he attended always made comments to me about how polite he was, even if it was before a detox, even if he still had the drugs in his system, where you would expect someone to be hateful, or my response was, he better be. But it was yes ma'am and no sir. And I always told my mom that my kids would be very ornery, but they would have manners, and that turned out to be true.
He got clean, was there about a month, and then they flew him home. Actually, my wife did fly him home because he wanted to come home before they were completely done. So we paid to get him home. He was sober for 6 months, 5 months, off and on. He had done really pretty well. I mean, we thought we might have had him over the hump. And then he fell off the wagon, so to speak, and it was really rough on him this time. I think what was happening is, as you know, I'm sure addicts do lots of things when they're sick, when they're dope sick. He stole my wife's wedding ring, not once but twice, 2 different ones. Insurance paid for the first one. Couldn't get the second one insured through our insurance company, so the second one was gone. Sold it for pennies on the dollar. We even know who he sold it to, but couldn't do anything about it. Police reports were taken and all that. So, needless to say, he wanted to go to California to rehab. He wanted to get out of Oklahoma, wanted to try to get away from the local influences. The rehab broker, which is what we call him now, flew him out there, took care of all the paperwork, was seamless, felt like it was the right thing to do. We got him back home. He stayed in contact with Cade, and that's when we started picking up on potentially there being a little bit of shady, because he was asking Cade that if any of his friends were addicts, to give him get them a hold of him, and he would help get them well. And matter of fact, he would give him $100, $200 kickbacks. And of course, at the same time, he's not telling me all this real time. This is coming out in bits and pieces. So it's not like you just have this epiphany one day that. But he got sick again. We were in the process of moving again. We'd lived in the same house for 20 years, and with all this going on, we had to just get a 1-year lease, and that lease was up, and it was time to move. We wouldn't tell him where we were moving to, for obvious reasons. I wanted to keep track of him. I was paying for his phone. The deal was you have to keep your phone on so I can at least know where you're at, but you can't know where we live until you're better. So he was literally living on the streets, basically at the time, living couch surfing, which he would pretty much worn out because he had stolen from all of his friends' parents as well. And most of his friends were also addicts. So they were all kind of homeless together. Needless to say, the last day I saw him was the last day in the rent house that we were in. His sister and I were picking up the last load, and when we got there, he had broken into the rent house just to get in out of the weather. The electric was still on, so the air conditioner was running. I let him stay in there while we were finishing loading up. He helped a little bit, and then I told him, I said, "You gotta go, bub. I mean, I can't leave you in the house, In the meantime, he had gotten a hold of JB, who had sent an Uber. The Uber came and picked him up, took him straight to the airport, flew him to California. He was in California that night. We never knew he was leaving town. I mean, he's an adult. He was 19, 20, but he knew that we would disapprove of him going back to California with no real plans because one, it cost us $600 to get him home the time before, and so he thought he was trying to take initiative and just he needed to get well. He knew he was sick, so I don't blame Cade for wanting to go get well. Problem is you get through 30 days. The insurance stops paying as soon as you're out of medical detox, out of your, there are some halfway homes that will accept some insurance, that insurance will pay if there's a doctor on site. Very few and far between. So JB had gotten him into a halfway house there in California on the premise of finding a job within a couple of weeks, and then they take a portion of your money. Problem is, he has no driver's license in California. He has no income at all in California, no birth certificate, no nothing in California. He's not going to get a job in California. So this goes on for a couple of weeks. He gets in a scuff with some other dude in the halfway house and gets kicked out of that halfway house. So he's on the street in California, ends up in the drunk tank in California from him and meeting some random person, girl, hang out on the beach, get drunk, and get thrown in the drunk tank. I don't find out about that until 2 days later. He gets out of the drunk tank. We're trying to make arrangements to try to get him home, really trying to get him in another place, get him in a halfway house. And that's when this JB guy says, well, look, just get dirty, and I've got a place ready for you tomorrow. Get dirty tonight. I'll have Uber take you to the so-and-so tomorrow. You'll test dirty, and you're back on.
The rehab broker sent him money by Cash App. He said, if you test dirty in the morning, I can get you into another rehab tomorrow.
So what happens is they go in, they test dirty, and they're admitted. The minute they're admitted, these facilities are paying people like JB a finder's fee. $1,000. Maybe it's $1,000 a month. Maybe. And so as long as my insurance is paying that facility money, JB's getting money. When Cade is out of the facility, JB's not getting the money anymore. That's the reason why JB didn't have a problem sending Cade $100. He would send him $100. He put him in a hotel. He bought him a hamburger. He literally sent him money to buy the heroin that killed him. And we have all that in writing. In a phone. That phone was given by me, hand-delivered to an FBI agent that was in Tulsa, Oklahoma. They kept the phone for 3 or 4 weeks. Came to my work, brought it back to me. I talked with them, and they were like, well, they're going to work on it, but so far they haven't been able to find this JB guy. Well, in the phone was not only JB, his cell phone number, which I understand can be a challenge. Those can be throwaway phones. But he wasn't even just using Cash App. He was using... what's the old school MoneyGram or Western Union. He was sending Cade money through Western Union with his real name on there. So I was just beside myself. They thought that he was potentially in Salt Lake City. FBI did. But as my wife had mentioned, this was COVID. COVID had just hit. COVID had just gotten bad. So I had multiple phone calls, even more than my wife, knew about, just because I couldn't give her information. She wanted to know info, but I didn't want to give her bad info. I had a couple of group phone calls with the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and they had an FBI task force set up in the Orange County Sheriff's Department specifically to investigate the rehab facility's fraudulent behavior. They knew stuff was going on, and they were trying to prove it. And our case was supposedly going to be perfect for that because we had this text phone, we had this cell phone, and they downloaded it and everything. And then I called them several times, and nothing had ever came of it. And then COVID happened, and you couldn't reach any of them. Every one of their offices were closed. They weren't working. They were all working either remotely or I didn't have their cell phones. I had their office phones. And by the time COVID was over, I hate to say it, I'd kind of given up. And some of that information that I had back then, I don't even have anymore. We've moved again. I don't have all the documentation. But it especially then, I'm assuming it probably is still similar. Especially then, it was a real racket. I mean, it was a flat out racket. They wouldn't send him home, so they had human trafficked him to California, strand him in California, know that he has no real way to get home other than mom and dad. This guy has since learned that mom and dad really don't have the money to get him home. So he just keeps him there in this cycle. Well, I'll just get him dirty for $50. He'll get back into rehab. He makes his money. And at the same time, he's telling Cade, hey, it's $100 if you get somebody to give me somebody, give me a name. If I can get them in a rehab, I'll pay you $100. So it just happened to be that the very first time Cade got heroin, it killed him. It had fentanyl, a very high amount of fentanyl. The needle was still in his arm when they found him. I mean, it killed him pretty much instantly.
I talked to him at 10 o'clock on June 10th, and he was wanting to come home. He was wanting to do sober living in California, which is very expensive. Insurance doesn't cover it. So I mentioned this kind of started when my dad passed away. And so he was angry with God for a very long time. And I told him when we took him to rehab once here in Oklahoma, this isn't going to get better or change until you reconcile yourself with God. He didn't leave you. You walked away from him because you're angry. And that was probably a year before he died. So our last conversation was about a song that he had been thinking about in his head. He said, do you remember that one from camp? And I said, of course I do. We went to camp every year. And I said, that is God trying to get your attention. Because he hasn't given up on you. None of us have. So I want you to keep thinking about that song. And okay, Mom, that makes sense. And we know from his autopsy report that he died around 2 a.m. So just a couple hours after I talked to him. He was found by housekeeping later that morning when they came to clean the room. And my husband was contacted by Orange County Sheriff's Department about, I think, 2 or 3 that afternoon on the phone to tell us that he was dead.
I don't know if you've ever had any dealings with a death out of state. It's federal law. You can't transport a body across state lines unless it's embalmed. Yeah, federal law.
Never heard that before.
Federal law. So to get him home, we were going to have to embalm him in California at California pricing, and then buy him an airplane ticket, basically, and fly him home. And then have to have funeral services and stuff here as well. So we decided we would cremate him there. Then you don't have to have all of that. And that was fine. Cremation with us was fine. By the time we'd got him home, I wouldn't have wanted wife to see him in that condition anyway. But we had to go through and do all that. So by the time we got him home, got his phone home, got his possessions home, it had been several weeks by that point. And that's when I get the phone. I realize the phone still works. He's still using the same PIN number that he was the last time I had it. We still have that phone. Matter of fact, I kept that phone service for 3 years and just kind of would check it ever so often to see if any of his, anything was coming in new. And it would occasionally. There was a few people that I suspect were probably dealers, previous dealers. Yeah. So that's the main thing I wanted to talk about, was just the rehab situation, and the fact that I think if COVID hadn't happened, when COVID happened, the FBI was putting together resources to combat. They had already done it in Florida, and that's why there was so much more rehab set up in California now than in Florida. There used to be tons in Florida. Florida pulled back because they regulated it in Florida. So now it's heavily regulated in Florida. In California, it was basically wide open. They could have medical rehab facilities and not even have a full-time doctor. All they had to do is have a doctor on the board that would come by once every so often, sign off on charts, never see a patient, but just come through, and then quote-unquote trained personnel.
The FBI took his phone because we have a word-for-word script of his conversation with the rehab broker the night before he died, of the money transactions, the plan to go to a new rehab, all of that in Cade's phone. But shortly after Cade died, COVID happened. And I think the world was just focused on that, and it would have been a fruitless, effort to pursue it. And I know some of the moms in our group have gotten justice for their children. And I was resolved a couple years ago that we never would. But just yesterday, arrests were made in the death of Matthew Perry. I don't think that would have happened if fentanyl wasn't a thing, even though he died of ketamine poisoning. It was the same way. Brokers contacting his assistant who exact same thing. And I also read an article that it upset me for several days, of a case in California where a broker, I believe it was a broker, it may have just been a rehab owner or manager, and altogether 4 or 5 people charged with money laundering, insurance fraud, all the things that happened to Cade. Back when it first happened, I said, okay, one thing is we're in Oklahoma, this happened in California, there's the distance issue, the money issue. You have to have money to be able to pursue an investigation and a legal proceeding like this. And we are lacking in knowledge of the law, and having law enforcement say, yeah, we're not going to investigate this because this is what he chose. He died in Costa Mesa. So Costa Mesa police were involved in finding him and taking care of all that. But then all of our correspondence has been with Orange County Sheriff's Department. No, I expected no kindness because it was California. No hate, people. But the first detectives we spoke with were kind. The coroner, very, very kind. She had no idea of knowing that Cade was vain about his hair. He had quite the head of hair. It's gorgeous. And she snipped a locket of his hair and sent it to us. It was precious. Yeah. I've been told it happens a lot in California and Florida. And Cade was given, we're pretty sure, in the thousands of dollars. And they also wanted Cade to refer his friends to them because our insurance paid for rehab many times. I mean, we're talking what? $30,000 a month or more for rehab, and then let him out, give him a little money to score, put him back in. You get another $30,000.
That is a whole nother level that this subject needs to be investigated further. And like I said, I thought we had the FBI on board. They completely were not shocked by it, just so you know. It's happening. The FBI were very clear that this is happening. They consider it human trafficking. Not sexual human trafficking, but it is a form of human trafficking. They get you out there, they get you stuck, they get you dependent on them, they keep you dirty. And my insurance paid $250,000 in 3 years for rehabs. $250,000. There were days it was literally $10,000 a day, but he was staying in the Taj Mahal of rehabs in Costa Mesa, California. It was this nice, big, fancy house. They would get to go to the beach after they got through their initial detox, and but then my insurance is just paying out left and right. But it was clear that the rehab broker, he's getting paid by the rehab facility. I don't have that I don't have the spreadsheet, but that's obvious what's happening, because he's literally telling Cade, hey, you get me another guy, I'll give you $100. Here's money to get dirty. Why else are you going to do that? He's not going to pay Cade to get dirty to get him back in rehab for him not to get anything out of it. There's no way. Cade's never even met. They've never even met face to face. They never even met.
Actually, our local district attorney, when we told him what had happened to Cade, was not surprised. He had wondered why that wasn't a thing before he even talked to us. And I said, well, evidently it is a thing. I have not encountered anyone else in our fentanyl community who's experienced that. I wish I did, only for the fact of comparing stories, gathering facts. And it's been interesting in our journey to see how differently people grieve. His dad doesn't want to know details and facts, and I do. I need that. Like the coroner, I mentioned the kindness. She assured me that he had no trauma on his body. And I thought, what a strange thing to say. And then later, I said, what a wonderful thing to tell mom, that her child had no signs of physical pain, abuse, fights, injury, nothing. That he was just as he should, yeah. He just went to sleep. We're having a hard time getting this message into schools. They're very resistant. We're not getting school districts that want to have Narcan on campus. And they're saying high school, middle school, yes. We went to a middle school, we being our little group here of moms, crusading not too long ago, and told about our children and the dangers. Showed them Narcan, how to use it, where to get it, to talk to their parents. And before we could get to our cars to leave, a couple of students in that middle school went to the office and gave them their drugs that they had just purchased from a high school student. And they said, we don't want these because I don't know what's in it. And that's why we do this. No matter how many tears are shed, how uncomfortable it is, how sad we get, that makes it worth doing.